Hello again, or hello for the first time. October is Bat Appreciation Month, so today I'll be talking about bats. They're definitely one of my favorite animals and have fascinated me for many years. I originally began writing this script 3 years ago, and I have been finding so much information about bats. I might have to make more than one video, but I don't know if it will be this month or I'll save it for next year. Anyway, let's get to the video. Bats are often misunderstood and feared. They're misrepresented in Halloween decorations to incite fear, and many people associate them with the spread of rabies and vampires. However, less than 1% of all wild bats have rabies, and they must contract the disease. They are not born with it. And there are only 3 species of vampire bats, and they do not drink human blood and will not attack unless provoked. Bats range in size from 2 inches long to some having a wingspan of 6 feet. The earliest fossil of a bat is remarkably well preserved from the early Eocene rocks in the Green River Formation of Wyoming. Bats are the second largest species group of mammals after rodents. The approximately 925 species of living bats make up around 20% of all known living mammal species. In some tropical areas, there are more species of bats than of all other kinds of mammals combined. Bat taxonomy reads as follows. They belong to the kingdom Animalia, the phylum Chordata, the class Mammalia, the clade Scrotifera, the order Chiroptera, and suborders Megachiroptera and Microchiroptera. There are also new classifications of suborders, Pterochiroptera and Yangochiroptera, but I won't be getting into that today. Bats are unmistakable. No other mammals have true wings and actually fly. Some mammals, such as squirrels and lemurs, can glide through the air for long distances, but they are not capable of sustained flight. The name Chiroptera is derived from Greek and literally means hand, wing. Evolution has shaped their wings through the elongation of the digits or fingers. Thus, the majority of a bat's wing is actually its hand. Bat wings are modified forelimbs, much as are bird wings, except in the case of bats, the flight surface is covered with skin membrane. This flight membrane, called patagia, usually extends down the sides of the body and attaches to the hind limbs. In birds, the flight surface is provided mostly by feathers and is supported by the wrist and 2 digits. Additionally, the muscles used in both the upstroke and downstroke are found in the chest of birds, while the upstroke muscles are on the back in bats. Bats also often have a tail membrane called a uropatagium in order to accommodate powerful flight muscles. The thoracic region of bats is quite robust. In addition to providing power, a massive chest and shoulders maintains the center of gravity between the wings, making flight more efficient. The opposite is true of the posterior end of the body, which is small relative to the chest and back. The orientation of the hind limb is also unique to bats. The hip joint is rotated 90 degrees so that the legs project sideways and the knee faces almost backwards, due in part to the rotation of the hind limb. The walking motion of bats differs from other tetrapods, often appearing awkward. Most bats have a tendon system in the toes that locks the claws in place, so the bat can hang upside down even when asleep. The body of a bat is ventrally compressed with a short neck region. The bones tend to be slender and lightweight. The majority of the body weight is concentrated in the chest region due to the large flight muscles. The overall shape of the head varies more in bats than within most other groups of mammals. Some bats have very elongated muscles, while others have broad, short faces. There is a correlation between the shape of the head and the type of food eaten. For example, most nectar feeders have long, narrow muzzles that are good for reaching into flowers, while many fruit eaters have short, broad faces, good for biting rounded fruits. The ears range from small and round to large and pointed, and often have a cartilaginous fold called a tragus present at the notch of the ear. There is additional variation in the nasal and lip regions of bats. Some bats have complex nose leaf, folds, or wrinkles on their muscles. The function of facial ornamentation is not well understood, although it may affect the emission of echolocation calls in some species. A major misconception about bats is that they are blind. This idea originated from the fact that bats are able to successfully maneuver in the dark and often have small eyes. While some bats do have very small eyes, many have large and complex eyes. experiments on several species of bats have shown that they are able to distinguish patterns even at low light levels. Bats usually have black or brown fur, although the fur can also be gray, white, red, or orange. In some species, there are stripes on the face or down the back, or patches of white on the face or above the shoulder. The length of the fur also varies among species from short and dense to long and fluffy. The wing membrane, the patagium, is usually dark in color, although it may have white on the tips or be a lighter color around the bones in the membrane. A few bats have white or pale yellow wings. There are also little hairs on the membrane itself. These hairs can be the color of the wing or the same color as the body. As a group, bats eat a variety of food types. The majority of species eat insects. Species specialized for fruit eating, nectar, or pollen are especially abundant and diverse in tropical regions. Although most bats tend to be specialized for a particular diet, most frugivorous bats also include arthropod prey in their diet when available. At least one extant species, the unusual New Zealand lesser short-tailed bat, is omnivorous. Some bats are carnivorous and eat animals like frogs, rodents, birds, or other bats. Several species are evolved to trawl for fish. 3 species of bats are vampire bats and subsist solely on the blood of other vertebrates. Although most stories related to mythical vampires originated in the Old World, there are no Old World bat species that feed on blood. Vampire bats occur only in the neotropics. Vampire bats eat blood by using their sharp incisors to make incisions in the skin of their prey. An anticoagulant in their saliva keeps blood flowing while they lap it up. Only the common vampire bat, Desmodus rotundus, eats the blood of mammalian prey. The other 2 species of vampire bats feed only on birds. Bats are found throughout the world. They are missing only from polar regions and from some isolated islands. Typical habitats include temperate and tropical forest, deserts, open fields, agricultural areas, and in suburban and urban environments. Many bats forage near freshwater streams, lakes, and ponds, preying on insects as they emerge from the water. Generally, if a terrestrial habitat provides access to sufficient roost sites and appropriate food, 1 or more species will be found there. Bats generally have very specific roosting requirements which differ among species. They may roost in caves, crevices, trees, under logs, and even in human dwellings. Bats may also use different types of roosts at different times. For example, a species that hibernates in a cave during the winter may use crevices and tree holes as roost during the warmer months. Many bats live in groups, although some species are solitary. Often, bats roost in colonies for some portion of the year. Living in a colony can serve many functions. For bats, one of the main purposes of group living is to collectively conserve heat. Bats are small and have high metabolic rates, so heat conservation is vital. Many bats hibernate during the winter and undergo daily torpor to conserve energy. Bats clustered together can number from a few individuals to groups of thousands or even millions. Some bat species migrate to hibernation sites or to follow a food source. Most bat species are not known to defend foraging areas, but this behavior is known from some tropical species. Territorial defense of roosting sites is also known in some species. Echolocation is another strategy in bats. All microchiropterans rely heavily on echolocation to navigate through their environment and to find food. Bats call at frequencies that are typically higher than humans can hear. These sounds bounce off objects and produce echoes, which bats can hear and interpret. Bat calls vary in duration and structure. Some species use short calls from 2 to 5 milliseconds at a rate of repetition, while other species use longer but less frequent calls, about 20 milliseconds. The frequency or pitch characteristics also vary within and among species. Differences in characteristics like frequency and duration affect the ability of an echolocation to produce echoes from objects of different sizes, shapes, and at different distances. As a result, echolocation call structure can reveal quite a bit about the ecology and foraging strategy of a bat species. Perhaps the biggest functional difference between vision and echolocation is that vision is a passive mode of perception, while echolocation is an active mode of perception. Vision typically relies on external light sources. Echolocation is quite different in that the energy provided is by the animals themselves, because bats have tight control over what kind of sounds they produce. Bats can exhibit a high degree of control over what type of objects they can perceive. Bats can also use a form of passive echolocation where they detect and locate prey based on prey-generated sounds, such as frogs calling or the sound of a beetle walking across the sand. Bats communicate with one another in a variety of ways. Although bats may be able to hear and interpret the echolocation calls of other bats. There is little evidence that those calls are used directly in communication. Bats employ a suite of communication calls, most of which are audible to the human ear. Some species use a diverse repertoire of social calls, which can be useful in intraspecific aggression, mother-infant communication, and mating behavior. Scent marks and pheromones are also important in bats, as they are in other mammals. Scent is used to communicate reproductive status and individual or group identity. Many species have special scent glands near their faces or their wings. Bats also communicate with visual displays, often during courtship. Some species have special markings on their wings and engage in ritualized displays to attract mates. Mating systems vary among bats. Many temperate bats mate in the fall as they aggregate near their winter hibernacula. These bats are generally promiscuous. In many neotropical microchiropterans, one or two males defend small harems of females. Males secure all matings with their harem females until other males supplant them. There are some bats that are monogamous. In these cases, the male, female, and their offspring roost together in a family group, and males may contribute to protecting and feeding the young. One megachiropteran species, Hypsignathus monstrosus, has a lek mating system where males gather in a lekking arena to display to females, who then choose the most desirable of mates. A large number of bats breed seasonally. Temperate species often breed before they enter hibernation, while many tropical species breed in a cycle that is linked to the wet-dry seasonality. All species that are not seasonal breeders occur in the tropics, where resources may not be as variable as in the temperate regions. The function of seasonal breeding is to coordinate reproduction with the availability of resources to support newborn young. To this end, many species have also evolved complex reproductive physiology, including delayed ovulation, sperm storage, delayed fertilization, delayed implantation, and embryonic diapause. Females generally give birth to 1 or 2 pups per litter, but in some species, litter sizes may reach 3 or 4. At birth, newborn bats weigh between 10 and 30% of their mother's weight, putting a large energetic strain on pregnant females. All newborn bats are completely dependent on their mothers for both protection and nourishment. Aside from the few monogamous bat species where males contribute to feeding and protecting young, all parental care in bats is provided by the females. Some males defend feeding territories for their harems, thereby contributing indirectly to the survival of their young after birth. Bats cannot fly when they are born, so young bats either remain in the roost while their mothers forage, or cling to their mothers during flight. Females of many species form maternity colonies while they are lactating and rearing young, In some species, females will communally care for young with babysitters, caring for the cluster of young while their roostmates forage. Juveniles grow quickly and can usually fly within 2 to 4 weeks of birth. They are weaned shortly thereafter. Thus, lactation is relatively short, but metabolically demanding. Bats are extremely important pollinators and seed dispersers, particularly in tropical communities. Also, insectivorous bats help to naturally control the populations of crop-destroying insects. Unfortunately, approximately 25% of all species within Chiroptera are considered threatened by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. At least 12 species have gone extinct in recent times. Megachiropterans tend to be more at risk than microchiropterans, but both groups are facing substantial threats from habitat loss and fragmentation. Destruction of or disturbances to roost sites is a particular problem for bats. Pesticide use also indirectly harms bats that eat insects or plant products that have been chemically treated. Species with relatively small geographic ranges and/or that are ecologically specialized tend to be at greatest risk. Efforts to protect bats have increased. For example, many caves that serve as large hibernacula are fixed with gates that allow access by bats, but not by humans. In the United Kingdom, all bats and bat roost are protected by law. Several large roost emergences, including evening emergences from a roost under the Congress Avenue Bridge in Austin, Texas, draw millions of tourists each year. Conservation organizations like Bat Conservation International have growing memberships among the general public and run many successful bat conservation projects, including projects in the developing world designed to increase awareness and appreciation. Rather than trying to eradicate bats from homes and neighborhoods, you can place bat houses in your yard to give bats appropriate roosting habitat. And of course, you can help bats by going vegan. Since the majority of their problems come from habitat loss, and we know that animal agriculture is the main reason for habitat loss, going vegan will help bats keep their homes and live in peace. Well, that is it for now. Check out the links in the description for how you can help bats. Take care.